Welcome back to the Built on Air podcast. We are in season 15, episode 5. Good to be with you live this Tuesday morning. Got myself and Camille back and our regular guest host, Scott Rose, with us. Welcome back, Scott.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Always good to have you back. So the Built on Air podcast is an hour-long show we do live every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern. And we'll walk through what we're going to be doing today. We always start with our Around the Bases to keep you up to date with what's going on in all the communities and latest features of Airtable. Then we'll do a spotlight on On2Air, our primary sponsor. Then Scott's going to walk us through a third-party app called Noloco, and show how that works with Airtable. And then Camille's going to walk through some updates with Timeline, both the view and inside interfaces, I believe. And then a shout out to join our community. And then we're going to wrap up talking about the new home screen and help you understand that. So with that, let's get started with our Round the Bases. Couple feature updates. So we'll talk about those first. They launched mobile interfaces, at least on iPhone. So I'm not an iPhone user. I can't test this yet. But I know there's been some reaction, but there's some screenshots of what you can do in here, some things. Any of you played with it yet?
So while I do work for the company Apple, I also am an Android user. At least for the phone. So I haven't been able to actually use it for an extended period of time. Of course, all of my coworkers have iPhones. And so I was able to see what was like transferred over, and not every page is available. Sort of unsurprisingly, the newer layouts are more compatible with the mobile interface, and the older ones that are much more custom are not. I haven't seen any charts make their way over. I don't know if you could have a chart at all on mobile. The elements that moved over seemed to work fine. Of course, I haven't used them for an extended period, so I don't know if they're buggy or anything like that. But Scott, have you been able to?
I do have an iPhone. Unfortunately, I haven't played with this yet. One question that I have is that it seems like, are they sort of ignoring the grid view? Like the new interfaces don't have a grid view option.
You can still make one. It's just not surfaced for whatever reason. I think like list view is sort of assumed to be, everyone's favorite over a grid view, but that's not always the case, right? Sometimes a list is more appropriate and sometimes a grid is more appropriate. And I haven't come across a full interface build where I didn't need both in some instances. And the times when I didn't need both, I leaned towards the grid over the list, because that's when like presentation matters, and it's less about presenting a bunch of data like all at once. Sometimes you want the field descriptions, which aren't in a list view. So yeah, while they're not going to be present in that opening sort of screen for creating a new interface page, you can still create a full grid thing. And I would imagine it's compatible. I don't know. I haven't been able to use it. I know Kavan is the first person to respond to this thread. I'm sure I'll likely agree with whatever she says. As soon as it's available on Android, I'm sure I'll have similar things to say.
Yeah, I will have to actually test all this out. I haven't actually had a chance yet, unfortunately.
The only feedback I saw, I don't think I have it up, but I know there's been discussion in the Built on Air community about some of the limitations. In general, it looks like fairly positive feedback. Alicia says, I like the look of list view, but hate the feel of inline editing in list view.
Yes.
That's one of my issues with the list view, one of my multiple issues, which is why I like the grid view better.
I would agree. Like I said, I feel like it's best for presenting and less about like, I need to edit data that might be filtered a certain way, only show me my records, things like that. for list view, it's great if I just like, here's all of your projects, you don't need to edit a bunch of stuff at once. 1 or 2 fields, fine. But if you really are getting in there, list view's not quite ready for that, I would say. I know they're making improvements and whatnot. It's improved more frequently than the grid view because it's newer, but I would agree with Alicia and Scott that it's not purpose built for editing so much as presenting.
Interesting.
Is this an interesting tidbit? I'm just reading this. You added drag and drop back to site sheets.
So if you pull up the thread that we covered, I believe the week before or the week before that, Phil Rose, who works at Airtable, responded that you can now disable the newer build system for detail pages in the interim. I'll see if I could pull that up if you don't have it.
Yeah, I don't have that up. Yeah, I think just reading through the comments in general, people's responses have been positive, saying it's a little buggy but promising. So a good start. I don't know if it's quite production ready yet, but
yeah, it's certainly not done because there are certain things that aren't available. And I would imagine there are some things that won't be available ever. Like I imagine the super old layouts just won't ever be compatible with mobile. And I think we're just going to have to bite the bullet on that. However, all of the newer stuff should, in theory, eventually become available. And also Android. Come on now.
Yeah. That's what. Yeah. I mean, as long as it's coming soon, they can release, early. But yeah, that definitely needs to be there. Yeah. Also looks like Airtable employees are responding, so that's good.
Oh, there it is. We're actively working on Android.
Well, they should. I mean,
yeah.
Not exact release date yet.
I have that other thread up if
okay.
we want to go over that too.
There we go.
So I misspoke. This is someone else at Airtable. Phil was the person who responded first from Airtable. This is someone else, but they're basically saying in the interim, while they're working on improving site sheet behavior or detail pages in general, you can convert a newer detail page to what they're referring to as the legacy layout or legacy format. So you would look for the 3 dots in the top right corner and convert to legacy layout. Just so you know, you can't reverse this. You can't take an old or a legacy layout and convert it into the new system. So once you do this, you'll have to make a new one if you want to use some of the features that were added to the newer sort of system. So they also highlight the things that they're actively working on, some of which is in response to the various bits of feedback that they've received, including being able to more directly edit the fields themselves from within an interface, being able to customize rows and columns. That to me is promising because they could have just said rows. They said columns, which is good for me because I feel like I'll be able to drag or at least control the size of individual elements on the page in 2 directions rather than 1. Mm-hmm. They say gray tinting will be added for visual separation. Previously, we were able to do either gray or whatever the light version of the color of the interface was, where now it seems like we're only getting gray. Okay. Field helper text will be available on interfaces. You can have helper text on a form view where it'll say like the name of the field, and underneath it, much like a field description, it will give you additional place to put description. That seems like it would be useful. And they say more is coming. So so I would go back to this thread. This is the one called Changes to Side Sheet Behavior. It's on page 3. If you wanted to read that in more detail.
Yeah, it seems like maybe they listen to our podcast because it seems like they gave us this legacy option shortly after we talked about this a few weeks ago. But really what I think is it's a reaction to all the backlash that they had on the forums.
Yeah, so way back when with the, I don't remember the precise order of events, with the homepage change, which we'll be discussing later, I believe, if we have the time for it, you were able to opt out of the homepage for some period of time and then that cut off. Now, were there changes implemented after the opt-out period? No, I think it was the same. I think it was just delaying the inevitable. Whereas in a perfect world, such as like we seem to be seeing with this change, there's a change coming in the pipeline. You don't have to use it yet. And while they're still sort of cooking, you're able to give feedback and say, actually, this doesn't work. It'd be great if it would do this, etc. And by the time you're not allowed to opt out anymore, the major things will be addressed. Not everyone's going to be happy, of course. You can never have a truly perfect product, but like no bugs, number one, and then you don't lose features or functionality. So hopefully this is a better implementation of that idea, being able to continue as you are used to for a particular project while still getting to test some of this new functionality and see what works and doesn't work.
Yeah. This is the way to do it. The way to do it is what you just said, give people a choice. They can test it. They can give feedback. Hopefully they implement that feedback and then they roll out the new change instead of just one day we all wake up in the morning and boom, there's this whole new way of being suddenly.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so lots of changes there, and I think we've alluded that a lot of the changes that they're making were in preparation for these mobile updates, which are now we're starting to see. So definitely making that a priority.
I think Camille predicted that. Camille, was that your prediction that's why?
I have vocalized it, sure. I think a sort of pattern with Airtable is they'll have some major thing cooking in the background. In this case, mobile ready interfaces. And that is something that many people had requested for quite some time. If you go way, way back to when interfaces were first launched as a beta, some of the things people wanted was available on mobile because at the time, the Airtable mobile app wasn't cutting it for a variety of reasons. And then it took presumably all 3 years to sort of work on it. I'm sure it was a gargantuan task. And then slowly but surely, they were adding little things that culminate in the mobile ready view, because Airtable as it existed, 2020, 2021 wasn't compatible. So they had to make little changes along the way in order to drop this release. So things like the newer interface pages that are less customizable, that means they're easier to put on mobile. And that's why those are the ones, generally speaking, that work on mobile, whilst the other ones are kind of 50-50. Sometimes they get converted over and sometimes they weren't. And things like the list view, although we just said it's not great for mass data editing, those moved over into the mobile interface. From what I've seen, again, I haven't been able to test it myself, fairly smoothly because they were built at the time they were already thinking about mobile. That's my inferring, unsure how accurate I am, but I feel like that's kind of what happened.
Yeah. Dan, is your takeaway from this that Camille needs an iPhone? Is that because that's what my takeaway is?
I will say I have a Mac as my personal computer.
Oh, nice.
I'm halfway there. It's just that my phone is 6 months old. I don't need a new phone.
That's true. I used to work with Apple for 6 years.
I've been there 6 months. So.
Oh, nice. And now Camille's been there full time 6 months. Congratulations.
Yeah. Well, here's Kai gives us some closure. It appears that grid views do not work on mobile. So if you actually have an interface that uses a grid view, the entire interface doesn't show. So you have to switch it to a list view to work.
Now that's interesting. So like if the page contains a grid view, the whole page doesn't get. That I think is not great. What I would want, right? I'm assuming this is an older page that was fully customizable. You drag and drop everywhere. Right. What I would want to see is that all the elements on the page that could be converted over, presumably the text, right? The number field stuff at the top that might give you context and things, even a record picker might get converted over, and you get a box that says element could not be rendered or something. And then to clarify to the user that it's not in error,
Right.
It's more that, grid views coming soon or something like that. I would prefer to see that rather than the whole page not being, available.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be
Very
cool.
good. All right, let's move on. Let us know in the comments what your reaction is to mobile and what you want to see there. There was another one that came out. This one came out on that Tuesday of last episode. Linked record creation, deletion in various elements.
So this is probably one of my favorite sets of improvements to interfaces in some time. Of course, when I get to play with mobile, I'm sure I'll like several things about it and dislike several things about it. But this update for, the desktop interface experience is like so many automations saved of nonsense workarounds for adding new records and deleting records.
Totally. Yeah, if you guys remember the dreaded lock icon at the bottom of the screen before.
They even have a screenshot of it.
Yeah, there it is. There's the screenshot. It said you cannot add new records. At least it told you. You couldn't do it.
Sure.
But now you can.
Now it looks like it's okay. Yeah, so list, grid, calendar, Kanban, and timeline elements. So most of them.
All except calendar. No. Well, what's missing?
Yeah, that might be all of them.
Huh. Okay.
Nice.
Yeah, I was wondering if it was just list view, but they say grid.
I'm gonna feel like a real amateur if I've forgotten the view type.
Yeah. There we go. List, gallery, Kanban, calendar, timeline, and grid. Yeah, that's all of them.
So what I like most about this update is that they've separated out adding records inline and adding records via a form. And this is most applicable to the list and grid views where inline adding, makes sense. Because when you add inline in a grid, right, values might come in if it's grouped. The grouped value will come in if it's not an editable field, if it's a non-calculated field. But there's nothing that prevents you from leaving required fields empty in that case. So using a form is a great way of saying, here's what you need to fill in. Here, we're not going to bother showing you this field unless this value is filled in with a particular value. You can have defaults set for a form. Those are great in those instances. But for the reverse, if you just want to add, you don't have like data constraints like that, and you just want to add a whole bunch in one go, adding inline is very useful. You can toggle those on or off separately. A minor complaint, if you want to delete records inline, you have to turn on adding records inline. I feel like those should be separated out as well, because I'm thinking of like a junction table, right? I don't necessarily want to add records inline because I want to pick from, I want to make sure I have unique records, and I could do that more easily through a form, but I want people to delete line items easily. So that's more of a minor sort of complaint. But other than that, basically everything in this update is stuff that I had personally been wanting for quite some time, because it is just so many bases and so many interfaces you had to have one button for each element, right? For your user that says create a new record, and it would fire some automation. You'd have to wait for, the automation to complete, and you don't necessarily have to do that anymore, which is great.
Yeah, I wonder how many are like Carlston here that has been holding off building interfaces because of this feature. Can now start using interfaces.
I think it was probably surprising for most people when they were building their interfaces for the first time, and they're like, "Oh, wait, what? You can't do this?"
Yeah.
I kind of understood it when it was in its beta phase, right? Because like creating a linked record under the hood, I guess it adds some complexity there. And then when interfaces moved out of beta and was just like a full launch, I was like, ooh, we still can't do that. Huh. That seems like a major missing. It was so bizarre to me that once it moved past beta and it still wasn't there. I think we're like a year after.
Yeah.
Right? I think it was in beta for 2 years, and now it's been a year since it's no longer a beta, and now we're getting this feature. So strange that it took so long.
Yeah, better late than never, I guess.
But if I can tie everything back to some grand conspiracy within Airtable, they probably had to do this before they could do mobile. Because you expect to just press the button for like that floating plus button that was always locked. You expect to press that in a mobile environment rather than having a custom button appear some strange way in whatever Airtable decides it goes in a mobile sort of view. So I feel like they had to do it in order to launch mobile.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Enough. All right, next one. We've actually been, sometimes some weeks it's very negative on decisions made by Airtable. I think this one, relatively happy with the stuff. Here's one. If you were dying for more Slack integration, they've introduced actionable messages. And so what that means is inside of Airtable, you can actually, or inside of automations, you can actually create these messages that have buttons associated with them that then trigger another automation that can do stuff in Airtable. So I started to play with this. I need to get it approved to do this. So maybe in a future episode we'll show how this works, but kind of cool. I don't know that people were demanding it, but
I never heard anybody demand this, but it is kind of cool. This is actually the first time that one of their actions, their automation actions, can do something natively that Make cannot do natively, which is interesting because this is not possible with Make. I don't even know how they did this, but it's very cool.
Yeah. Slack has always been one of the first party integrations that Airtable had. Like before automations were part of the product, you would always be able to send to Slack or sync your notifications to Slack or something. That was always an option in Airtable. And then automations came, and then they got an action, same with Google Drive and Google Mail and whatever. So this is maybe Slack is just the favorite that they have this very specific, and it seems like it'd be fairly useful for teams that are spending a lot of time in Slack and you have very standardized sets of actions that you do. I don't know if my team is gonna be able to make use of it, but it seems like it would be cool. I am curious how the different buttons are set up. I can kind of see it in that screenshot, but I do wonder, is it just a dialogue that comes up and says, pick another automation to launch, or is it something that does it open a update record dialogue and it's just that step that is triggered by that button? I don't know. It makes me think of branching automations like you can do with Make. But I don't know if it's of that complexity.
Yeah, I was also reading, so I actually don't know the answer to that. I was reading somewhere that it will only wait for someone to click on that for a certain number of days or something, and then it expires, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess the automation in a way is, I guess we'll have to see this on a future episode because I haven't played with this yet either, since it just came out a couple days ago. So it's almost like your automation is waiting in a pause state in the background, and then it does something when you click on one of those buttons.
Oh,
interesting. Yeah.
So it's almost like there's queued up, your automations will be queued up in the background. I don't know if there's a visual for this when that happens, and each one is waiting for a button press, I guess, to finish its run essentially.
Yeah, I need to test this out because that's
too.
Substantially different than the other actions in what they do, because it's one sort of go for all the other types of actions that happen one after another as soon as the other one finishes. So the concept of like waiting for a user response isn't something that's really represented in other action steps.
Yeah, I could be wrong on this too, but that was my understanding from reading the documentation on it.
Yeah, I mean, looking at this, it says if they click on approve, there's one field updated. So, yeah, so it's listening.
Okay. So it's almost like a conditional, a conditional action step, one for each button that will update the record that triggered it in some way.
Yeah. But I don't think it pauses. I think it'll go on to the next step if you added the next step, because this action is just to send the message, and then it'll
Yeah, it seems like the whole automation will continue, but that one step is sort of like, maybe it's not pause per se, but that one step is still waiting. Yeah. But you know what? Maybe it has nothing to do with the automation. Maybe they're just doing it with the API behind the scenes.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
So maybe the automation is never paused and never waiting at all. That part of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that kind of makes sense. You could have another automation that triggers when approve equals check, just have another automation. I could see you not necessarily needing it all to be one automation, especially if there's a wait time for the person to click the button.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, you can do good stuff. Melanie, definitely true. Enterprise probably demanded it.
Almost certainly. Yeah.
It's like, yeah.
Yeah, you know what? That's what it must be. They must somehow encode those buttons with an API call to Airtable, so the automation is completely out of the picture by the time the person clicks on the button.
Yeah,
that must be the way that they're doing it.
Yeah.
I feel like this is a wild guess. I feel like each button they set up gets its own webhook, and each webhook, right, will complete the tasks you assign to it. But I feel like that's what's happening under the hood, that the button simply fires a webhook with the predefined values attached to it.
That's and they do have that. Oh, I'm sorry, what was that?
I just said wild guess.
Yeah, they do have that limitation on there's a certain number of webhooks you can have if you're using the API. So this may this probably works around that limitation, is my guess, if they're using webhooks.
Yeah, I think so.
But I think it's very cool, though. I mean, none of my clients have requested this, but like Melanie said, somebody in enterprise probably really needed it and demanded it.
Yeah, more discussion on that in our in the BuiltOnAir community. Looks like it's still not being fully rolled out. I think it is fully rolled out now because I did see it in a base that didn't have a Slack automation before, so I think it's fully rolled out at this point. All right, last one, and then we'll move on. Russell found a new feature that I don't believe was announced by Airtable. So now in the sidebar view, in interfaces, there's now a print button icon.
So I have seen this for at least a couple weeks. I feel like it was there at the time the new side sheets were released, or before it, because old side sheets, I think, still also have this button. I could be wrong. There's a couple buttons in the top right for a side sheet. There's the close button. There's the get linked to, the unique URL, and then there's the print button. I know at least the link button is there for old side sheets. I don't know if the print button is there, but I feel like it is. I've tried it. Sometimes it works well and sometimes it doesn't. It's for things that are very wide that don't print well. If you have a very wide grid view, right, it's still going to cut off. I don't know how to get around that, but yeah, it's useful if you just want a simple print of a not particularly complex side sheet.
Yeah. What I kind of don't like is that it prints it like in input format, and and not like, text read format.
Yeah, there's two options, one for like format for printer and one for not. Format for printer will remove backgrounds. I wonder if that also removes like the outline of a field edit thing. But I would agree that I would want, if it's printing, not to come with those outlines because they're not useful,
Right. So, all right, yeah, more discussion there on updates. So that concludes. We'll move on with time. Those are some of the features that came out this week, and keep you up to date on what's going on there. So let's move on to Air. If you were watching last week's episode, we talked a little bit more in depth of the changes that were going on in onto Air. So I'll refer you to last week's episode for some more behind the scenes on that. But for today, just going to focus on our backups, which is we are now focused on backups, and that's what we are going forward. We'll develop from there and branch out, but we'll be focused in managing your data, helping it easier to interact with your attachments and data inside of Airtable. We have some great case studies that you can learn about on our website. So check it out at ontoair.com and /backups. We'll get you more information about our backups, and you can sign up and start backing up your data. Best practice to make sure that you have your data in more than one place outside of the Airtable backups. Okay, with that, let's learn about Noloco.
All right.
You want to share your screen?
Yeah, let me share my screen here.
First, you got to tell us what that name means.
Oh, yeah. Noloco means no code, low code, which is the world we find ourselves in with Airtable, which I guess would be considered low code. So, there's a bunch of, so Noloco is, I feel like Noloco is sort of flown under the radar, and I've been playing with it a lot lately over the last month because I set up a client with Noloco, and this is one of the portal tools that is available for Airtable. It's, it competes against Glide, Softer, Mini Extensions, Stacker. Those are the ones that come to my head right now. Is Pori a portal one also?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And this one has been the most powerful and the most full-featured one that I have found so far. Now, it is a little bit confusing to set up, and one of the good things about it is that their tech support is so incredibly responsive that if you do get stuck, they're right there to help you with it. And so I've been pretty pleased with this so far. And they're actually, let me just show you, this is their website here. And they connect to more than just Airtable. They even have their own built-in back-end database system. So you don't even actually need to use another app like Airtable to feed your data into this. So you could actually use them as your database source as well. But you can see it ties into Google Sheets. They're working on Smart Suite integration and Salesforce integration. And so it's really cool. So for people that are watching that may not know what a portal is the name that they give to a web app where people can log in and just see the records that are related to them. So for example, like a customer logging in and just seeing their own invoices from the past, or a manager logging in from one company and only seeing his employees, but not the employees from any other companies. So if you're using Airtable in any way to manage data for lots of different customers, lots of different companies, or lots of different anything, and those things need to be broken up where people can only see the records that apply to them, that's where you would turn to one of these portal tools. And so this has been my favorite one so far. And I wanted to show you a very brief demo of how you would set it up with Noloco. So what I have here in Airtable is I created a very basic invoicing system called Farm Sales. So I've got a table here of some products that the local farmer is selling some dairy products and some meat products here. And then we've got a list of customers here, and we've got their name, phone number, email, all that. And then each customer is linked to one or more invoices. And so here's where you can set up the invoices. And then each invoice has multiple line items on it. And you can see the line items here. This is, all the line items for all the invoices. And so this is our basic system. And so let's say that we wanted to create a portal where the customers can log in and they can see their previous invoices, and they can also generate new invoices. But of course, we don't want them seeing any of the other customers. We don't want them seeing any of the other invoices from other people. And that's where a portal comes in. So I'm assuming that eventually, this is just an assumption, maybe Airtable will roll out portal-like functionality in interfaces, but I don't know for sure about that.
You can set it so that you only see records where the email address is yours, or the Airtable collaborator field is yours, or you are in a group that is assigned to a particular collaborator field. But it's not, you do have to set that up for each, like grid element or Kanban element, whatever, that you put on the page. So it's not automatic, but you can do it. The primary advantage of using Noloco or some other third party is that the pricing structure is likely more hospitable to your wallet than doing it all within Airtable. And they also typically have more customizable options. In Airtable, of course, you're paying for every editor or creator, whereas in systems like Noloco and Stacker, et cetera, you're priced differently, and it ends up being less than it would be if all of your users were directly within Airtable.
That is true. That is true. And that's also one of the main reasons that, thank you for pointing out all those reasons why people would probably choose a portal. And the other key reason, which goes along with that, with not only is it extremely expensive to do it in Airtable, but every single person has to have an Airtable account.
Yes.
So that's sort of, in many instances, you don't really want the general public to even know you're using Airtable, really, or you don't necessarily want them to jump through the hoops of creating an Airtable account just to get access to it. And with this, you just send them a link to a website. And with Noloco, they actually create an account with Noloco, but you can brand it with your own domain. People don't even need to know that you're using Noloco. You could just put it right on your website. And so it's sort of a more public-friendly option in a way.
Yeah.
By the way, to your point about the pricing, Camille, this is what the pricing would look like if you're creating a customer portal. This gets a little confusing here. This is the starting price, $138 per month, but that's just to sort of get you in to create the app. If you want to start adding in what they call external users, that's the general public. It's an extra $99 per month, $99 per month for 100 users. So that's significantly cheaper than Airtable. So that's $1 per user. So they distinguish between internal users, that's people like us and the people watching the podcast who are building the system. So $138 per app per month gets you, I think, one person that can log in and build the system. And then for every additional internal user that's a builder, it's $19 a month. And then this is when you open it up to the general public, $99 per month for 100 people from the general public to access. Okay, cool. So I just want to show you real quick how we would set this up in Noloco. So here we saw our Airtable system here, and we are going to build an app. And so I'm just going to talk you through just the basics, just to give you a demo of how you would do this. They have some templates here that you may want to use, but we're just going to start from scratch here. We'll click on Create New App. And if you're not using your own domain, they ask you to choose an app name here. Well, actually, the domain thing comes later anyways. So you always start by choosing a unique app name. So I will just call this farmsales.noloco.co. And then I'm going to choose Airtable as the source. And we're already connected here. And so I am going to choose my farm sales base here. And this is going to be the name of it. And now it's connecting to Airtable, and it's asking me which tables I want to bring in. So I'm going to bring in all these tables. So when you first start setting this up, it's easy to quickly get up and running, but this tool is so complex that you would not believe how much this can do. It has built-in formulas, just like Excel. So you can do formulas right here. It actually has its own automations built in, so you can do fancy things within Noloco, where like it'll populate a field with some piece of data, and then you could send that data back to Airtable. So where it does calculations and other things here, then goes back to Airtable. It lets you create buttons. It's the depth of this tool is really, really impressive. And I'm still learning it myself because I just started playing with it about a month ago. And my clients, my one client, they're using it and they love it so far. And so basically, okay, it finished the setup phase. And so this is where you can continue building your portal, or this is where you can start building your portal. So over here in the left margin here, this is how you navigate through. This is what they call the app. So this is what your customers logging into the portal will see. Everything from here onwards. They're not going to see this dark black vertical thing here. They're going to see from here onwards. And you could set your own logo up here as well. That's the Noloco logo right there. So when our customers log in, we know that we don't really want them seeing our customers' database. So what we're going to do is we're going to hide this from them. So you click on these little three dots here. We're going to hide that from the sidebar. And we may not even want them to be able to navigate to the products table. So we're going to hide that as well. And we may not need them to see a list of line items. We really just want them interacting with their invoices. So when they log in, they're going to see everything that is above the line here. So they're only going to see invoices. So right now you can see that we have all the invoices for all of our customers. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go into this next section here, which is called data. And data, this is for us only. So the customers will never see what we see here. This is showing us the information that it's pulling from Airtable. So these are the 4 tables that I had in Airtable. And I don't think we need to do much of the setup here. Let me just see what this is. Yeah, I think, let me just see something here real quick. Okay, right. So what we need to do, what we want to do, I'm going to get to that later. What we want to do is we want to set this up so invoices are filtered based on the customer who's logging in. So before we can actually set the permissions on that, we actually need to go to our users, because we need to tell Noloco who actually are our users. So what it does by default is it brings in anybody who is set as a collaborator on your account. And I think it only brings them in if they're a creator or an owner. I'm not 100% sure about that. And what we want to do is we want to create a whole users table. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on, go up here and click on sync your users. You can see how it's a little bit confusing when you're first learning this, because things are sort of spread out all over the screen. So there's a lot of discovery. If you're trying to learn it on your own, there's a lot of discovery of where you go on the screen. And so where I just went right here was all the way up here to the upper right, and I chose sync your users. So then we're going to tell it what our new user list is. And so I'm going to call this our customers, and I'm going to choose our customers table. And then it asks you to map the email address and the first name field. I actually have first and last in the same field, so I'm just going to map the first name field. And then it says, what is their user role? This really shows you the complexity of this program. We're not going to talk about user roles today, but you can create all these different user roles, and depending on who logs in, they can see different screens. They have different functionalities. Certain things disappear. I mean, this thing is so in depth, like you wouldn't even believe it. And so, but this is the very basic setup. So what I'm telling it is pull all the customers from my customers table, and those are our users of this app. So I'm going to click on save here. And it does take a couple minutes to set up. It says right here, your users are now syncing in the background. Please check back in a few minutes. And it'll send you an email when it's done syncing. So it's currently bringing in all the customer data from this customer table. And we have 501 customers in this table. So then let me refresh this to see how it's doing on the sync so far. Let's see. All right, we got 21 in so far. So it's in the process of syncing. And now that it's in the process of syncing, we can go back to our data table here. And now what we want to do is we want to tell it that for our invoices table, we don't want the customer to see all of the invoices from the whole system because they would see everybody else. So we want to set permissions for the invoices. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on this little icon right here, and we're going to enable permissions. And then it gives us this table here, and we're going to say, it says, should these users, so it says apply these permissions to users with the following roles, because we chose that everybody in our customers table is considered a user. That's the role, the default role. And it says, should these users have access to all records? We actually do not want them to have access to all records. So we're going to turn this off, and we're going to create a new rule that says that when the customer is one of the logged in, so basically this is the customer linked record field. So that's what the link represents there. So just going back to Airtable real quick, this is, well, actually, it's not a link record field. Oh, yes, it is. I'm sorry. I apologize. It is because it's from the invoices table. And so that little icon means it's coming from this column right here, this field right here. So when the linked record field named customer in invoices is one of the logged in user from the customers table, and you choose the customer's name right here. So see, this is where it gets a little bit confusing with these drop-down menus and the different icons and things like that. I actually got this wrong multiple times when I tried to set it up, but their tech support talked me through it. And basically the reason it is one of is because you can have multiple customers. For example, if multiple customers are all at a company and they're logging in with a company email address, then it could be any of the customers that are linked to that company. So in other words, this linking can go multiple tables deep. That's actually what my clients are doing. So it gets very, very detailed. And I'm just going to wrap up in a few minutes here because I know we're running a little bit late on time, but I'm going to save this. And that should be all the setup that we need to do. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our app. This is what our customers see now. And we're going to go into the invoices. Now you can actually see here, it's actually showing us exactly what our customers are going to see when they log in this left margin area here. Down here, there's a toggle. It's a build mode toggle, and you have to toggle this on and off when you're working with Noloco. When I toggle it on, it gives me all the other tables that we've hidden. I'm sorry, when I toggle build mode on, I see everything. When I toggle it off, it's as if I'm a customer that's logged in. But nobody's technically logged in yet. I'm still looking at it as an admin. But what you can do here is you can view it as another user. So what you do is you click on this, and this gives us a list of all 501 customers that are in our customers table. And so now we're going to pretend that we're logging in as somebody. So we're going to log in as Stacy Schmaltz. I'm going to choose select, and now boom, it's showing us what Stacy is going to see when she logs into the system. And it says down right here, we're logged in as Stacy Schmaltz, and she only has 2 invoices in the system. And if I come back here, we see that Stacy, she only had, this is showing all the line items. This is actually not showing her invoices. If I were to actually, let's go to this table instead. If I were to actually, I could have just put in a lookup field there, but if I were to actually sort this, wait a second. Let me do it this way. I'm back here on this table. Let me sort this. Stacy Schmaltz only has 2 invoices. Invoice number 1001 and 1008. And if you come in here, you can see that's accurate. And so if we come over here, this might be easier if I actually group by the customers so you can see it better. So John Wick has 4 invoices. This one actually has no line items on it. But let's go in, and what we're going to do is we're going to view this as John Wick. This is what would happen when John Wick logs in. This will change to show his 4 invoices. And then you can go on from there. You can edit what happens when they click on one of these lines. It takes you into a detail of that screen. And if you go into, if I clicked on this edit button up here, this is me as John Wick, me as the customer going in, and I could edit it. You could turn on and off the editability of these fields if you want. And if you go into build mode, this is where you as the builder can start adding fields, move things around. You can put text on the screen. You can embed videos. You can do all sorts of cool things. And
can we stay on this page really quickly? Because a lot of, with the logging in as one person and, just seeing their records, you can do that in interfaces. Of course, we just went over how expensive it is to do so, but you can do it. But I think this is where a lot of the value add for things like Noloco is embedding video, embedding iframes, which means you can embed a whole other website or another app in there. I don't know how complex you can get with an iframe if you could give it a variable URL. So that might change depending on what record is in there. That is a lot of like the value add for Noloco. And I've only played with it a little bit, and there's so much in here. You probably could do a whole episode. And
yeah,
I really like the edit mode where you start off just looking at your data and you have an edit button to actually edit the records. In interfaces, it's all live where, it's either editable or it's not. There's no sort of toggle for that.
Yeah, totally. And I'll just wrap up by just saying 2 quick things here. The complexity of you would not believe how complex this is. And to your question that you just asked, Camille, check this out. I put an iframe here on the screen, and of course you can move these things around wherever you want. And look at this. You can actually make it pull from a data field. So it's completely customizable. So it'll change dynamically based on a field, or you can import a URL or a script.
Right, static one. Yeah.
Yeah, or a static.
Yeah, that's great. So you can have an Airtable formula that outputs some embed URL and plop it right in there. That's great.
Yeah, exactly. And so so I'll stop here, but this is just the tip of the iceberg. You can see that every single field here has its own set of options that you can change. There's a lot more. You can have filters, sorting and limiting records. There's buttons that they've got built in with a lot of functionality. Like, it goes on and on and on what you can do with this. So I'll stop there. I said I'll stop there before, but now I really am going to stop.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, that gives you a little taste of what you can get with Noloco. So try that out. I'll quickly give a shout out to our BuiltOnAir community. Join us. We'd love to have you in. And we're going to wrap up with Camille talking about timeline updates.
Okay, so there have been a lot of different changes that are somewhat recent with the timeline. I think some of them were launched like yesterday or the day before, and some of them were launched a week ago. I just wanted to give an overall sort of view of it because they're not all available everywhere. And some of the additions that I think are quite useful. So when you open up a timeline view in the data layer for the first time in a while, it will give you just sort of a alert that things are different. It's a very simple timeline view. One of the things that annoyed me to no end was that if you were very zoomed out and you had very small events that only lasted one particular day, they became practically like unreadable. One of the changes that was added a couple of weeks ago is that labels will now stretch beyond the beyond the actual width of the event. So you could still read what they are, or in this case, the rightmost event. You can see there's a couple of them stacked. You can highlight over to get the name of the event if it's not shown elsewhere on screen. What you can also do, now you can turn on wrapping labels, which isn't particularly useful in this view, but if I adjusted the height of records and then the width of records, I would be able to have those labels wrap around instead of extending past. So that's somewhat new. The newest one is record width. So the default is precise, widths aligned to the exact dates. In this case, all of these events are, I believe, 1 day long. The second option, expanded, is new. So width fills up each interval. Right now, I'm going to turn that on, and you can kind of see what happened. I have my view set to year split into 2 weeks. If I set that to split into quarters, these are going to expand out to whatever this interval is. Obviously, if it were day, it would be even more precise down to the hour. And I believe it works at every one of these scales. So this is really useful for timeline views that have a lot of records that are spread out in time and don't last weeks. Several events that are only 1 day long, but you have to look at them across a whole year. You no longer have to really, really zoom in order to understand what each record is. So those are two of the more recent sort of adjustments made to timeline views. They are available for the data layer version of a timeline. Just as a note, if you turned on the appearance setting record width expanded, you won't be able to drag and drop anymore because it's not actually the width that it is. It doesn't really make sense for me to be able to drag this into a whole different quarter because remember, this is only 1 day. So what day in that quarter will it land on? Airtable doesn't want to make that guess for you. So just so you know, if drag and drop editability is important, then don't turn on that option. Moving into what interfaces look like, you have that option for the full screen timeline view. If you look under appearance, it's still there under record width. And the last sort of place that you could put a timeline is as a individual element, and I don't believe that is an option. I looked at it yesterday and it seemed like it wasn't there, but actually it is there. Maybe it didn't, maybe the release hadn't been complete yet, but never mind. I was going to say some features are available in some places and some aren't. Turns out I was wrong. It's available everywhere. So any place you could put a timeline, it would seem you have this new option for expanded. I'm going to be using that probably quite a lot. One of my more recent timeline builds, I had to use a formula that created a false end date so that small records could appear longer just so that you could see them on a timeline. And now I don't have to do that. So yay.
It's a great improvement. It's wonderful.
That's awesome.
And I am glad that you can put that everywhere. I was under the impression that this version, the individual ploppable timeline, didn't have it, but it appears it does.
See, those are the good surprises we love from Airtable.
Yeah.
It's good to know they're actually still updating the core view elements and not just only in interfaces.
Yes, I think that's a good sign that, we are still getting improvements to the data layer, because while a lot of my end users are going to be in interfaces, I'm still going to be building a lot in the data layer, and I want new features.
Yeah. Very good. Well, that wraps up. I do have a hard stop at the top, so we'll hold off on the home screen. I know Scott was anxious to share his input. We'll have to have you back on and see how you really feel about home screen.
Perfect.
Sounds good. Well, thanks for coming on, Scott, showing us that Noloco demo. And Camille, as always, And we will see everybody next week on the Built on Air podcast. Have a great week.
Thanks. Bye-bye.